Thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to check out The Burnham Project on Substack. You can get Burnham podcasts, you can read my blogs and all sorts of cool stuff. It can even be sent right into your inbox. You can also watch us on Rumble and YouTube. We like Rumble better, but you can also watch us on YouTube. You can also find Burnham Podcast anywhere that you find your favorite podcast. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, click the little bells, the Rumble button, whatever the service has to offer. Click it, do that, follow us, tell people about us. Thank you very much. Look, y'all, I got Dr. Shane Clements on this episode. Shane is a machinist by day. He's also been a minister for 30 years, been a pastor off and on. He's also a certified hypnotherapist. Buckle up. That's what we're talking about in this episode. Welcome to Burnham Podcast. I'm your host, Danny Burnham. When that light comes on, that's how we know. It's go time. We good? We still good? Everything good? Audio good? Video good? Cool. Well, then we're live. Here we are, as promised, with Dr. Shane Clements. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
What I was about to get into while we were just off air 2 seconds ago was that we may rehash some of this conversation that we've been having for the last 15 minutes.
That's fine.
For the listener, they don't know what we talked about, so It'll be new to them. You wear a bunch of hats. Got a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah.
So you're your dad, your granddad, your husband, your father, your hypnotherapist, pastor, sign language, all this stuff. So let's talk about let's get into your family first, which is what we were, I guess, most recently talking about. You got a big family.
Yeah. We've got 5 children living. We've lost 2 over the years. They would have been 12 and 14 this year.
So. Well, that's what I didn't know that about you, and we lost Joseph almost 2 years ago to the day, and then we had a miscarriage also, kind of like you guys ran. But I didn't know that you had also lost a child, so you understand what that's like, and the road to bounce back from that.
Yeah. With and with Michael, he had a genetic disorder, trisomy 18, and with all of the information that we got at the time, it was questionable whether he would even make it to term if she would carry him all the way. But then we had the C-section. She had it done. That's the only one of our children that she had a C-section with, and it was to give him every fighting chance that he had.
Right.
With all of the issues that he had genetically, and he had what they call an follicle, which the intestines were actually growing on the outside of the body. So that's why the C-section was necessary for that. But he lived 18 days, and every possible opportunity we get, he had to live, we made sure it was given to him.
Right.
But his little body just was tired of fighting at that time.
That's a lot to ask of a kid that size.
And it's like we were back and forth to Atlanta every day to the hospital with him. So, and it was one of those things. It's like, this is part of us that we're letting go back to the Father now.
Yeah.
That he had given him to us for this time. We got to experience it. We got 18 days with him. We learned a little about his personality. Yeah. And one of the things about his life was that it reached around the world. His story made it around the world through the power of the internet, and we made friends all over the world that we never would have known, awesome. Without him.
Well, as hard as that is, it's good to know that their story and their memory remains. Yeah. I know that helps us when people say, "Hey, I remember when Joseph did this," or when this happened, or he said, whatever. It helps us to talk about it. Or do you feel the same way?
We do, and that's what we let folks know is we're comfortable talking about it, about what he went through, what we went through, the things that we faced, the challenges we faced, back and forth to the hospital every day, what my wife went through, because, the wives go through a lot more than the fathers do. And so, and we try to be as open as we can so that if there's other people facing similar situations, maybe something in our story can help give them the encouragement they need.
Right. So, as you're going through all this, and I'm trying to put a timeline together, you're also an ordained minister.
Right.
Were you a minister at that point?
At that point, I was. We were. Let's see. That was in 2009 when we lost him. So I was still doing the missionary work with the deaf and hard of hearing, and I was actually interpreting at Gordon Central.
Okay.
When we went through this.
Yeah.
I was interpreting at Calhoun City at the elementary school and at Gordon Central, so I was back and forth between those two schools.
So you're already in ministry. Obviously, that's the worst thing any parent ever has to go through. How does your faith? This even sounds like a silly question to ask a fellow believer. How does your faith get you through that? What did that do for your faith?
Right. And a lot of folks, it's different for everyone. Every time anyone faces a challenge, there's no one way to go through a challenge.
Right.
And so our faith played in the fact that, and it's like anything else, we questioned a lot of things during this time. It's like, why me? What have we done wrong? What did we do to cause this to happen? And then you go back to when the disciples were asking Jesus, well, who sinned, him or his parents? To cause him to be blind. And Jesus said, neither. Neither one sinned to cause this to happen. This happened for my glory, for my benefit, so that you can see the power of God. And so, we go through that questioning all the time when things happen to us. But, when we turn back to the scripture, there is power there that will help get us through.
That's awesome, man. And I have talked about that before, and I've said, when the night Joseph died, my wife and I agreed verbally, like out loud together, that this had to point people to Christ. That was the only good that could come from that. And it sounds like that's been the same for you too.
Yeah. I put up on a blog post and the time of frame and the events that we went through with Michael Z and his story there, and again, it's reached around the world.
That's awesome, man. That's the power of the internet, I guess. Like you say, it gets the word out, and there are certainly criticisms, but at the end of the day, that's a good thing, to be able to get that out and to spread the gospel.
Exactly. That's what I tell folks, that I feel like if the Apostle Paul were here today, he would be using Twitter,
on Twitter
or Facebook or something. I don't know about TikTok, but
probably not TikTok, but I don't know, maybe whatever it takes, I guess, to get the gospel out. But so how long have you been in ministry?
I've been in ministry 30 plus years now. So it was 91 when I surrendered to preach.
Yeah.
And so I preached my first sermon probably about 2 weeks after I surrendered to preach. I think it was all of 5 minutes long.
That's how it goes, right? The first one was 7 minutes long. Yeah.
And now, an hour and a half later, they're having to cut the lights out.
The guy's pointing at his watch in the back of the sanctuary. Yeah.
Exactly.
Now, are you currently a pastor?
No, not right now. Yeah. Not pastoring now. The machine shop where I work at, I've worked nights and weekends there for the most part, and work a lot of Sundays. We've slowed down, so I've had a few Sundays off, but right now I'm not pastoring anywhere. We're kind of doing the home church type thing.
Oh, yeah, cool, good. That is a seriously underrated a type of church, I guess, so to speak.
Exactly.
I've done that before. We're a small church here, but I've done home church before. We did it when I was 10, 11, 12 years old. When you get in that home setting and you're in worship and you're in prayer and you're in song and all these things, there's nowhere to hide. Right. In big church, you can get in that back pew and you can kind of
disappear.
But there's nowhere to hide in that small room. That's especially, we even as small as our church is, we still sit in rows. But if you're sitting in the couch across from me in the recliner and we're looking at each other, there ain't no, there's nowhere else. But I feel like it creates a genuine experience a lot of times, or it should at least.
And that's one of the things I've really been looking into and studying is on that aspect, the organic church, the smaller house churches, and how the New Testament early church looked.
Yeah, sure. That's just how it was, right? You just had church at somebody's house or whatever space they might have owned, but it was no less church than these churches over here with the big steeples and the bells and all that stuff. And that's
that's me. Is for each person, it's an individual thing that if you're going to be led to worship truly in that setting, then that's where you need to be.
Yeah.
If you can worship truly worship, then at home, then that's where you need to be.
So at what point, though, did you realize like you were going to be a pastor? What was the thing? Always seems to be one thing, right?
Well, it was when I was 5, I went to Christian kindergarten in Summerville, Georgia at Calvary Baptist Church. They had a Christian school there. And I didn't know it at the time, but my parents were told that the Lord's probably going to call him to preach, and so I'm thankful they didn't tell me at that time,
That's
so
that it
wasn't an influence on my life.
Right.
Then later, my granddad told my dad he'll be called to preach, and it's like and they didn't let me know. These were not things that were influencing my decision. And then, I was in church as a kid growing up, did all the youth things, the activities, was a member down at Pleasant Hope Baptist Church. That's the church I grew up in. And then my cousins went over at Hollywood, and so I would go with them to Bible school.
My parents go to Hollywood.
And so we would hit all the Bible schools, during that time. Yeah. Back then they would do them, during the day.
Yeah.
And instead of at night. And so we would hit all of the daytime Bible schools and then all of the nighttime.
Right.
But that's where I grew up. And so, I had the church influence all my life growing up.
Yeah.
But it's when my wife and I started dating. The first time I called her up to ask her out, she's like, well, I'd like to, but we're having a revival at my church, and I can't go then. Okay. And so I got shot down.
If there's a good reason to get shot down, that's it.
It's kind of like the three guys with the excuse for not showing up that they gave the Lord, right? I have a wife and I can't go.
Right.
Out of all of them, he's had the most legitimate excuse, right?
There you go, yeah.
But so we waited. We went out the next week, and then she invited me to church with her, and so I started going to church with her there. And after a while, about a year and a half after we were dating, felt like I was feeling the call to preach, and I waited for confirmation, and then I would be out deer hunting, and I'd be like, Lord, if you want me to preach, send me a 12-point buck across
give me a
right here, right in my sights. And, but we know he don't work that way all the time. He can if he chooses to, but that's not how he normally works.
Right, it's not typically a ray of light and
usually that still small voice, right?
Right. But it's unmistakable, though, right?
It is. It consumed my life.
Yeah.
It was a constant thought that consumed me, and to the point that I had to surrender or completely get away altogether.
Yeah, and or be miserable. Just trying to be somewhere in between.
Yeah, and so that was in 91 when I surrendered and preached my first sermon.
How long did you preach before you were a pastor?
Several years before I pastored. The first church that I took a pastorate was in 2006, and it was up in Summerville.
Okay.
And so I was there for about almost 2 years at that church, and it was my first church, and it was a learning experience,
to say the least. Right?
Yeah. And I was young and fresh out of Bible college, and come from that independent Baptist mindset, and so I had a lot of learning to do there. And so some of the members and we worked together to help train me to become the man I am today.
There you go. Yeah, well, that's what it takes, right? I mean, people think that as a pastor, like that guy's on an island, right? He's got to figure all this stuff out for himself, and a lot of times that's the case, and that's how pastors get burned out. But to have those people around you, and it's not always a fun or easy thing. And sometimes it's them going, "Hey, dummy, let's do it this way." Going, oh, yeah, you're right. I see, But to have that support system, is that helps a ton as a pastor.
Yeah, one of the learning experiences there was the youth had a Sunday school class, and they were all excited. They wanted to make it their class. They wanted to feel like they had a place there at that church because there was a lot of older folks at the church, and so just a handful of youth. And so they asked, can we paint the Sunday school room? And I'm like, sure. And I went and bought the paint for them, and let them get in there and just go to town, handprints, paint everywhere.
Tango, we've been there before, right?
And there were a few members that were out of town while that happened. When they come back, it didn't sit too well with them. Yeah. And so I learned right then, that there are committees in place for a reason.
There's especially in the Baptist church, right? We had committees for everything.
Right.
Had committees for committees, but. Yeah, those guys are there for a reason, and you run things past them. And
it helps to get an okay from some of the folks, charter members and things like that.
Well, and what I've learned is if you run it past the committee and they say no, and it'll kind of hurt your feelings because you thought you had this great idea, right? But in the long run, you realize that these people on these committees are often older and wiser and more experienced, and at the end of the day, it comes around and you go, well, that was a bad idea.
Right.
Right.
And they've gone through this before a time or two.
Right,
and it's like, and that's like, the Apostle Paul tells Timothy, that we're to have mentors in our life that are mentoring us while we're mentoring others.
Yeah, it's just a big chain, we're all taking care of the next person behind us.
Exactly.
So you've been a preacher, you became a pastor. Do you ever feel like you're a pastor at church again?
If the Lord puts me there, right now.
That's the safe answer, right?
Right, yeah. But right now, I'm not actively seeking a pastorate position. I feel like I can do more as far as being the church in the place that the Lord has me right now than up in front of a group of people.
Right.
I'm always open for pulpit supply and that kind of thing. Yeah. And I've got preacher friends. Both of my younger brothers are preachers too, and one pastor's in Alabama and Center. So fill in for him a good bit. I've got a preacher friend up in Menlo area that I'll fill in for occasionally. Cool. And as a preacher and a pastor, it's hard to find. Yeah. Sound doctrine to help.
Well,
fill
that's the
pulpit.
thing. I could get any old body to come in here and talk one day when I can't be here, but to get the guy that you want that lines up with your church theology and all your, that's tough.
Yeah.
But it's good to know that there are people out there that will do it, because sometimes your pastor needs a break.
Yeah.
Sometimes he needs a vacation. Sometimes he gets sick. And I had a pastor one time. Tango, this was Ron. Ron Cancel comes up to me one Sunday morning, our pastor at Castle Baptist, and he was like, hey, I'm sick as a dog. This is at, church starts at 11, and this is at 10:45, 10:50. He's like, I'm super sick. So if I run off the stage, just go. I was always sat in the front row, and I was a deacon, so this just became my job. He said, just go up on the stage, find where I left off in my notes, and just read the notes, and then bring the music minister up, and we'll close it out. So I was sitting there the whole time, and every time he would shift his stance, I was like getting ready to run up
on ready.
Because I had preached before, but that was going to be a whole different thing. To run up there in the middle and be like, well, Ron might be in the back dying right now, but he told me to read his notes, so that's what we're going to do. But I guess that's be ready in season and out, right?
Exactly. That's what I've been told. Only 2 times I have to be ready to preach, and that's in season and out.
That's it, yeah. All day, every day, pretty much. But yeah, that's, I don't know. I've had a couple of guys on recently, some guys that had been pastors and weren't again and might be again one day, but that was always the question, would you do it again? It turns out it's not up to us. Right. I don't get that. Yeah. It's that call, that draw, that pull that we feel and go, well, I can't live if I don't do this. I can't live with myself. So I guess the door's always open, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's there. So pulpit supply, if you guys are out there looking, need a guy, hit Shane up, let him know. Just what do you need? 48 hours notice maybe to
possible. That way, yeah, if possible. I've walked into church services and they're like, "You're preaching tonight." I'm like, "Oh, okay."
Here we go. But being ready though, that's the thing, right?
Yeah.
But you've got your experience in ministry is quite diverse, right? Because you've pastored a church, you've preached, stood up in front of congregations. If you're talking about interpreting, you've done some deaf ministry. What was that like?
We did that for almost 10 years. Worked with a mission board out of Trenton, Georgia, Silent Word Ministries, and they've done a lot of work all over the United States. They have work up in the Northeast as well, up in Pennsylvania. They've got an office up there. They did a newspaper, and they did Bible study, Bible schools, and they would travel around the different churches and do the what they call Fantastic Saturdays, which were events to get the deaf in the community. Because if you stop and think about it, how many churches do you know that have an interpreter
Zero.
available?
Yeah.
and I actually have a friend that had asked on Facebook for the local churches here, how many have interpreters for the deaf ministry? And they're very few and far between.
Yeah.
So, it's and I used to tell folks when we were traveling, raising support for the missionary work there, is the deaf don't have it as well as we do. In that aspect, we get mad because they paint the church a different color or the carpet's the wrong color. We can go down the street to down to the next church because I pass 100 churches from my house to here, that I could go to at any given Sunday morning.
Yeah.
But the deaf don't have that opportunity. There's not a lot of places that offer ministry for the deaf here in the area, and you would think there would be more being next to the Cave Spring and Georgia School for the Deaf that we have. So they're limited.
Hollywood did a thing, maybe they're still doing it. They had a deaf church that was kind of attached to them.
They had chartered one there. I don't think it's there anymore.
Is it not? I don't know. I haven't heard anything about it in a while.
I actually interpreted at that service where they did the charter.
Called? Valley Forge. Was that right?
It was Valley Forge, and the fellow that was the pastor there, he had moved back to Ohio.
Okay.
And so I don't think there was anybody that was able to continue the work here when he had moved.
Right. Well, you can't, not just anybody can step into that role. You got to be fluent, in sign language. Do you get to practice your sign language at all anymore?
I don't much anymore, so I'm rusty. I can still carry on a conversation, and I can still get the point across, but I can tell that it's not as fluent as it used to be.
I had to learn. I worked with my friend Dana. She was deaf, right? Dana was so good at being deaf that I worked with her from August until October, and I didn't know.
Okay.
She was just so good at reading
Dana
lips.
Tarter?
Yeah, you probably know Dana. Everybody knows Dana. And eventually she went blind, right, when she couldn't read lips anymore. So I had to learn sign language. Well, I can sign. My signing is not bad, but I would sign to her, and she would just talk back to me. So I never really learned to read the sign language. So I'm still bad at that. I don't see her. I used to see her every day. I don't see her very often at all anymore. And she was the only deaf person I knew. So I don't get to practice my sign language. That was the whole point of that. Was I don't get to practice anymore either.
Yeah.
And I feel like I can still do it, but I don't know until I'm on the spot. But it's tough. We don't just have tons of opportunities to practice our sign language.
And it's a lot different too. Like I usually just interpreted, and there would be someone else preaching. Now I have signed and preached. I don't know that I could do
that's
it
a lot.
now.
That's a lot going on.
But your brain is fried at the end of that sermon.
Yeah,
big time.
I can imagine it. I knew that I was picking up a lot of sign language when I would think in sign language. I would catch myself signing to myself, to nobody in particular, but I would have a thought and I would sign it out, And so I knew I was kind of catching on them. But again, I've never been able to read it. I'm super bad at that. Somebody sign back to me and I go, can you, you spell it out for me?
Slow down.
But that's cool though. And that's a great point that the deaf person who has an interpreter at their church doesn't have the option of getting mad and storming out.
Right.
There's not an interpreter at the church. Like you said, I pass 4 or 5 churches. 6 on the way to this one, and I could get mad and walk out on my folks and go to some other church, but they can't. I had never thought of from that perspective, but that's interesting. It's a good point. But we have all kinds of options. We can go to any old church and get mad and stomp out, and it happens, right? We've all been part of that on one end or the other, and that's unfortunate, but that's life because people do people stuff. That's what I always like to say. So we've established that you are a minister and you're very deep and diverse in your experience, but you do this other thing that a lot of people are getting to know you for, it seems, and that is hypnotherapy.
Right.
So, that's like a dog whistle, right? When somebody says hypnosis, hypnotherapy. Let's make the distinction, if there is one, between you're a hypnotherapist. Is there a difference between that and a hypnotist?
Not really. A difference. Okay, so just in the title, but I am a hypnotist, but hypnotherapist, clinical hypnotherapist, board certified hypnotist, they're all pretty much the same thing.
Yeah.
When most people use the term hypnotist, though, they're thinking about what they see in TV and movies.
The parlor trick, right?
The parlor trick or the stage hypnotist show. You know, I actually had one client that come to see me before. And most people that come to see me in my office, what they know about hypnosis is what they've seen on TV and movies.
Right.
So, you know, it's mind control. And and I had one of the ladies, she was really nervous, and she's like, "Are you going to make me cluck like a chicken?"
Why is it always cluck like a chicken?
Or bark like a dog, right? Yeah. And I'm like, "Do you want me to?"
Can you? I mean, are you going to hypnotize me? Please tell me if you...
But in the clinical setting, what I do is it's more of a state of hyper-focused attention because, and especially now with the invent of cell phones and the dings and the buzzes and the whistles and the bells, our attention spans seem like they're shorter than they ever have been.
Right.
And so when they come to see me for help with stress, anxiety, that kind of thing, trauma release, quit smoking, which is one that everybody wants. You know, that's one thing everybody knows about hypnosis is the quit smoking. I had one guy found out one time. He said, "Hey, man, you're a hypnotist. You make me quit smoking?" I'm like, "Nah, man, I don't really do that." Yeah. I said, "But if you weren't a smoker, I could get you up to 4 packs a day by next month."
Oh, it works the other way.
Right. But no, I've helped a lot of people quit smoking. And if you follow me on social media, you probably seen my jar that I keep in the office.
Yeah,
it's
with all
full
the
of the cigarette packs and vapes and lighters and everything in there. And that's one of the reasons I opened the office. Be 4 years this year that we've been there. But my dad died 6 years ago from a smoking-related illness and disease that he had. He smoked all his life.
Right.
And I thought, well, you know, if I can, with this tool that I've been given, if I can use it to help give somebody a few more years with their family and friends, then it's worth it to me. And
so, like we mentioned that it's a dog whistle, and you get all these buzzwords and catchphrases that go along with it. How do you reconcile that with your faith? How does that work as far as the Christian believer goes?
Right. And so again, it's, you know, most people think it's mind control, and that's where it usually triggers that thought process, you know, mind control or voodoo or woo-woo, that kind of thing. And it's not. I try to tell folks, you know, I've been a minister for over 30 years. If I thought it had anything satanic to do with it, I would run from it as far as I could.
Yeah.
But it's I tell folks that the unconscious mind that we've been given is probably the greatest gift our Creator's given us apart from salvation.
Right.
Because it knows you better than you know yourself consciously. Your unconscious mind controls your heartbeat. It controls your breath rate. It controls your blink rate without you having to do anything consciously.
I'm getting conscious of all this stuff now that you're doing.
And so I'm watching when you do that, and I see when you slip into what we call an unconscious moment, because what it is, entrancement is you're going inside to look for the resources to process whatever's been said to you. So it's like when you drive down the road and you get somewhere and you're like, wait a minute, I don't remember those last 10 miles. How did I get here?
Yeah.
Your unconscious mind has taken over, and you've gone into the driving hypnosis trance. And so you're in a trance, and your unconscious mind does everything it needs to get you where you're going safely, while your conscious mind's off over here, you know, swatting at the kids in the back seat or whatever it is that we have to do to get. But it's taken over. Or when you're watching a movie and you feel the emotions they want you to feel, you know, you jump when it's a scary movie, or you cry when Old Yeller dies, and it's because you slipped into that trance. You're become so hyper focused in that your body actually reacts as if it were happening.
Okay, yeah,
and that's what hypnosis is. But what happens is our conscious mind gets in the way of this a lot of times. And like with pain perception, we're consciously focusing on that pain, in martial arts, I know you do the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Yeah.
And so when you get out there and you're rolling with a guy and you're in a hold and you're like, should I tap out? Should I, have I got it in me to stay in there? It depends on which part of that you're focusing on. And so when you change your focus, then you can change your perception. And when you change your perception, it changes your actions.
Okay. So you're talking about a trance, and that's another one of those trigger things where people think, that, like I said, when you think of hypnosis, you think of the guy with the little thing, and he's
the pocket watch.
Looking. So, but a trance is something that we do that happens naturally.
Yeah, all day long we're in and out of trances. I tell folks most of the time that my job as a hypnotist is to unhypnotize you from the trances that you've been placed into throughout life.
Right.
And now that we know how we still don't know how the brain works, but now that we have a better understanding of how the brain works, so with all the scans that we can do and see what areas of the brain light up when certain things are thought about or talked about and that kind of thing, we can direct the process better now. Yeah. Used to, in the old days, like with a stop smoking client that would come to see me, a hypnotist would either go for the aversion techniques, like to try to make it the most disgusting thing, which, and I grew up in a house full of smokers, and once I got away from that, anytime I get around it, to me, it is one of the most disgusting things out there. Just smelling it, choking on it. But, in the old days, they would try to turn it on them using that negative reinforcement type thing. But now that we know how the brain processes things, we know that positive reinforcement works better a lot of times for some folks. Now, that doesn't mean it works for everyone, and that's why I have folks come in, free consults for everybody that comes to see me for whatever reason. We do a free consult first to see if I think I can help them before we get started. And it gives me a chance to learn how they do things.
Right.
So, with somebody scared of spiders, how do you make yourself scared of spiders, or snakes? How do you do that fear?
Right.
And so when they give me the details on how their brain creates that fear, then it gives me the tools I need to head in the direction to point them to get them away from that.
Okay. So you're using what's already there.
Exactly.
Because it's in the subconscious mind.
Right. And again, that's all a model.
Yeah.
Everything that we know about how the brain works is a model.
Okay.
Because we can't actually get in there and see what's happening. Right. We have an idea of it. So we have a model, just like conscious and unconscious mind are a model. A hypnotic induction or a hypnotic trance. It's a model. Because I've worked with folks in a conversational setting that we call conversational hypnosis, where they never go into a formal trance, they don't sit and close their eyes, they don't watch a pocket watch, they don't do any of that kind of thing, but yet they're in just as much as trance and sometimes even deeper than if we were to go through the formal setting.
And you're having a conversation the whole
just
time.
A conversation.
Am I in a trance right now? Is this real life?
Possibly.
It just, at any point in a trance and hypnosis, are you out of control? The Bible says the fruit of the Spirit is self-control,
Right. And that's one of the concerns, and that's one of the things that I address in that consultation with everybody I meet is you're in control at all times, that you could stop this process at any time you want to. I've worked with folks over Zoom calls, video calls.
Oh, wow.
And it's like, okay, so if something happens, you're not going to be stuck
if we get
in a trance. Right. If we lose connection, in a minute or so, you'll realize, hey, we've lost connection, and you'll become alert. Or if an emergency situation were to take place and you needed to get out of the house, it was on fire or whatever, you would become aware of that. Your consciousness would take over again.
I don't know. This podcast could be 9 hours long. I have so many questions now. But every time you say something, it creates a new question in my mind. I don't know. This is what hypnosis, I guess, actually is, as it is that you're explaining it, is an entirely foreign concept to me.
Yeah.
I've been in casinos before when a guy would get up on the stage and pull somebody up hypnotize them. They would bark like a dog or take their shirt off or whatever. And it looks like that person is obviously not in control of what's going on, because they would either that or they're a plant right in the audience. And
they're not plants, but the stage hypnotist will vet everyone before they get up on that stage to make sure that they're going to perform, because that's what he's there for. Right.
Yeah.
Well, not necessarily a sucker, but somebody that will perform.
Okay.
And so, and so he's going to make sure when they're up on that stage that they're going to perform so the folks get their money's worth, the value for the ticket that they bought.
Oh man. Okay. Wait, are you following this? Tank, you good? Okay. Are you gonna give this a try after you go visit Dr. Shane in his office at some point? I don't know, man. This is
I'm wide awake now.
Right. I'm back. How long we've been recording here? So. Is it? I don't know. I'm trying not to just ask you to divulge trade secrets or anything, but is there a method? Is there something you say or a path that you lead somebody down to get them to you called it initiation, trance initiation, induction.
Right.
How does that work?
Well, there's several different ways. You've probably seen some on TV too, what they call the speed inductions, where a guy jerk an arm and sleep and drop them into a trance like that. And that again, that's more theatrics and stage work and that kind of thing. With what I do, most of the time I work with what we call a progressive muscle relaxation induction. Now, if there are hypnotists out there listening, I'm gonna get all kind of hate mail, because that's the one that we don't want to do. It's so boring. And the mentor, how we do hypnotherapy today is because of a man named Milton Erickson. And he's the father of modern hypnotherapy. He passed away in 1980, but his techniques and tools, and basically he bored people into a trance. I mean, he just, he had all the time in the world. And so, but he would bore them into a trance. And, but what I do is what we call a progressive muscle relaxation for most of my clients. And it's because we don't know how to relax anymore.
Right.
And so if I can just teach my clients how to do that, when they leave the office, that's a tool they can take with them.
Yeah.
So that at home, when things start stressing them out, they've got a tool and a resource now that they can use to help calm things back down.
Well, I've seen a lot of your videos, and you mentioned giving you the tools to do, whatever you need to do. So that makes sense, to give them something to take home with them, a mechanism they use.
I tell everybody that my job is to get rid of you as quickly as possible for whatever you come to see me for. It's not like a talk therapist that's going to keep you coming session after session. Right.
Well, you want to work yourself out of a job with each person, right? You want to fix these people. That's the idea anyway.
Which is not good for, a steady income, but
right. So you need these people to be fixed, but then to go back and find a different issue and come back.
Right.
And I got you.
And I do have some clients that do enjoy the experience.
Yeah.
They like the guided aspect of it, and so they're regulars. I've worked with them for a couple of years, but it's because they choose to, not because I want them coming back all the time.
Right. Was it you I was reading about? Somebody, it was, because I've been creeping you on Facebook the last few days getting ready for this, and somebody was saying, they were talking about how it's not like the sketchy chiropractor that's like, you're going to come back 32 times so I can get this worked out, and you don't force people to come back, and you don't force anybody to do anything. Everything is of your own fruition, and you come in free will and you leave free will, and I say free will. I'm a 5-point Calvinist, so I don't say free will a lot, but everything's up to the you don't call them customers, right? Clients, I guess. Yeah. So, but it's cool to know that, right? And it's not like this is a witch doctor thing,
right?
Where I'm gonna bring you in and hypnotize you and make you think while you're under that you got to come back.
Keep coming,
yeah. But it's you want to fix people,
right?
And not see them again.
Exactly.
So you're talking about this progressive muscle relaxation. Did I get that right? And that reminds me. And you may know about the Wim Hof breathing method. Have you ever heard of this?
Right, yeah.
So I discovered that a few years back when I was dealing with some pretty serious anxiety. And that, I don't want to say maybe it was a trance. I don't know, because you kind of get there when you're doing all the breathing techniques. And I've been in arguments about this before, and people are like, same kind of thing. The lady that told you that hypnosis was demonic or whatever, and But it was the same thing. Oh, you shouldn't be doing this. They called it breath work, and I'd never heard that phrase before.
Right.
But it's the same kind of thing. It absolutely changes your mindset. And breathing is 100% natural.
Yeah.
We breathe all the time.
Yeah.
But the way that he does it, it is intentional.
Yeah.
Right. And I guess it's the same.
And that's, I don't just do the hypnosis. I work with mindfulness breathing techniques and that kind of thing with my clients as well, because the breath is the one thing you have with you all the time. And so you don't have to have any other tools. You don't have to have any other gadgets for this. If you can focus on your breath. And you're going to lose focus. You're going to focus on it. You're going to breathe, whatever method you do. If you do like the 2 quick breaths in and the long breath out, like Dr. Huberman.
And then you got the 4-7-8 that Dr. Andrew Weil came up with.
Right. And so using any of those techniques, what it does is it turns your focus inward, so that you're not thinking about everything else that's going on in the world. You're focusing on
feel
that
the space in between your eyes. That's what always happened to me. I could feel like a tingle right here.
Right.
So that's where I would be focused. And then, without even realizing it, I had blocked out all these other things that were going on. And I was focused on this space between between my nose, between my eyes, rather. But I guess those are all kind of hand in hand. I mean, is that a trance when you get into that state where you've got everything blocked out? And
pretty much, I like to look at it as everything is trance. It's just whether it's a positive trance or a negative trance that we're in.
All right. So, how many people? I need you to come to church on a Sunday and tell me how many people stand up next to me in the front and tell me how many people
watch how many trance out while
I'm up there preaching. I can see eyes shutting and stuff like that, but I don't always know when somebody, because I can stare right at you, right, and just be somewhere else in my mind,
right.
So I need you to come identify those people so I can minister to them directly. But no, this is cool. It's my mindset coming into this was that I was not going to argue with you about hypnosis, because that would just be silly, and I never wanted to have a debate on this. This show is way too lighthearted for that most of the time. But to ask questions from a genuinely curious standpoint, and you're making sense. And it's not that I didn't want you to make sense, but we don't like new stuff. Right. Nobody wants to do new things.
Well, and things we don't understand, we demonize.
Right. Yeah. So. Which is why hypnosis is witchcraft, and we shouldn't do breath work or yoga. I guess yoga could be along the same lines.
Yeah.
I don't know. I never understood. And there are some aspects when you get into way into yoga that we probably shouldn't do. But to go to the YMCA and stretch and breathe is probably okay. But I guess hypnosis is along the same lines as far as the way that you're explaining it. So what have we left off about hypnosis? What would you tell people that might change their opinion of it that you hadn't already said? Because I don't know what I don't know about it still.
Right. And it would be one of those things. It's like, well, a lot of people are, well, can hypnosis help with this? And I'm like, well, let's talk about it, and see. Tell me what's going on, how it's affecting you, and I'll let you know, if I feel like there's something that could be helpful.
Yeah.
As far as fears, phobias, anxiety, stress relief, it's one of the best tools out there to get rid of. And that's kind of what I specialize in now is stress and anxiety relief. I get weight loss clients and things like that, and some of the fun clients, everybody's fun, but some of them that are really fun are those that it's not just for reparative type work. So it's not just for remedial stuff, but it's for generative change as well. And so I work with some sports figures that use it to enhance their sports performance, with college students that, during finals week, test-taking anxiety creeping in, I've worked with several folks that do equestrian events now, so like the dressage and the jumping and all of that kind of stuff. And that part I really enjoy, getting to work with folks like that. That's not just trying to fix things all the time, but it's like, hey, we've got something good here, but see if we can make it a little better.
Well, I think that sports has gone a long way to bring hypnosis to the mainstream.
Yeah.
Because we hear, especially golfers, right? They go to a sports psychologist, or they get hypnotized to help with this hitch that they've developed in their swing.
Yeah.
And then, why wouldn't you just go to a golf coach? Well, obviously that's not working because these guys are millionaires and they have the best coaches in the world. Well, whatever it is, they can't get past it. So they get hypnotized and then they come back and win the U.S. Open. Well, maybe there's something to it. Maybe it's real. Maybe it works. But I think sports has gone a long way to, you mentioned athletes, bringing that into a little more of a household, like familiar type word rather than just thinking about an episode of Scooby-Doo or, a parlor trick or whatever. But it's worth looking at. And I don't know, are there people who can't be hypnotized?
I haven't run across anyone yet that hasn't. But again, because we're always in a trance. So my job is to spot those trances. Now, I've had some people that we haven't been able to do the progressive induction relaxation, or progressive relaxation induction, or we haven't, or they have a harder time visualizing things.
Right.
And so we change the direction for them, and we do more of a conversational style hypnosis.
Okay.
But as far as anybody that's come to see me, everyone's been able to experience.
Well, I've talked to a couple of people about you coming on today and just asking for thoughts and, things. And people are going, well, I don't know if that would work on me, but I don't know. You hadn't run into anybody yet that it doesn't work on. Well, that's cool. So you're going to be in there tomorrow morning, right?
Absolutely.
What's your practice called?
It's Northwest Georgia Coaching and Hypnosis.
Okay. So we've gone way into hypnosis. What is the coaching aspect?
It's on the life coaching side, so it does a lot of. I've taken a lot. I've got the doctorate in biblical counseling, so I'm able to incorporate that in my faith into my practice because, a lot of folks, and that's one of the Google search terms is like Christian life coaches in my area or Christian. And there've actually been a few that look for like Christian hypnotists in the area because I guess most people don't think about that as a combination.
A Christian hypnotist. That's going to be a new one for a lot of people, I think. But because you don't put those two things together typically. So you are a Christian who is a hypnotherapist. How do those things overlap as far as the day-to-day? The functions that you carry out as a hypnotherapist when you get to share your faith in your job, or
I get to share my faith in my job. I get to pray with folks that come in that want me to. I have all of my biblical accolades up on the wall behind there just because that's what we're supposed to do, right?
Yeah.
Nobody really cares.
Yeah.
I mean, I could put them under the bed, and nobody's ever asked me for my certifications, that's come to see me. So. But they're there, and so that helps bring up the topic a lot of times. And I get folks that come to see me that would never set foot in a church, and I'm able to be the church for them, offer to pray for them, to share the gospel with them, from a perspective that they'll actually listen to it rather than, somebody knocking on their door on a Saturday morning with a gospel tract, shoving it in their face. Kind of thing. Yeah. So I'm able to be a witness, to be the salt and the light.
I got you. So, you ever hypnotize a deaf person?
Yes, it can be done because it's more of into the visual conversational style. So they're not going to have their eyes closed like most people think with hypnosis. But they go into trance just as well and as easily as a hearing person.
All right. So I don't know, listener, viewer. I don't know. I wasn't going to try to convince people one way or the other. I was just going to let you talk and get it out. And folks, I guess, can think whatever they want. I don't know. Man, are you convinced?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Tango's in. He's convinced. I'm curious. I'm more curious now, I think, than I was. Maybe we'll sit down some other time and talk more about it. Where are we at on time right now? That's it? Man, okay, we're good to go then, right? Rock and roll. So, man, I don't know. I thought I'd have more to say. I'm shocked, honestly, I guess, at how receptive I am to this whole idea. Do you see people that go from one polar opposite to the other as far as hypnosis after you've explained it to them?
I've had a few that have come in that have been skeptical of it, or their spouse has come with them. And that's another thing. My wife works with me, and so she's there in the office with all of my female clients, so that we have that there, so that they don't feel like I'm in a room with a strange man that I've never met before, being hypnotized. Yeah. So. But yeah, and so sometimes the spouse will come with them for that consultation and things, and they're maybe skeptical of it, or they may be encouraging the other person to come see me.
Yeah.
And because they believe in the power of it, but the spouse is skeptical, the one that needs the help, and so so I've seen several different mindsets and viewpoints that have come into the office.
So if two people coming together, could you hypnotize both of them?
Yeah, I mean, you see group hypnosis all the time, and a lot of, especially in the stop smoking realm, they do the big groups of that, which, in all honesty, it has about a 30% success rate.
Oh, wow.
But, if you think about it, if you were out of 100 and you were one of the 30 that quit smoking, it's worth your $70 or whatever it was for that session. So, and if it didn't help you, if that wasn't the particular way that helped motivate you to quit smoking, you're not out of a lot of money that way.
Right.
Or if you come on an individual one-on-one basis, usually it's a little more expensive than like a group session.
Well, if everybody's pitching in, that cuts down the cost for everybody.
Right.
I mean,
the venue you've got, you're paying for that, and it helps cover the cost of that.
Right. You ever done a big event like that?
No, never done any as far as the hypnosis goes, group. So it's always been one-on-one at the office.
I gotcha. Man, I don't know. You got this look on your face, man.
I'm just in it, and I'm like, this is so cool.
He's tranced out.
He might be. What are the markers that you look for?
It varies with each individual, but there are certain things that I'll watch for. I'll watch for complete loss of muscle in the face, so that it just goes blank. There's no tension. Right. Yeah. Some of the clients, when they go into trance, they flush, and so you can see the blood comes to the surface and they begin to flush. And I've got one client that she lets me share her story all the time, and so she's one of the ones that I've worked with for a couple of years that keeps coming to see me. But each time that you experience hypnosis, like the first time, most people that come see me, they don't know what to expect. Right. And so it takes a little longer to get into trance because it's all new.
Yeah.
And so once you've experienced it and you know what it feels like, it's easier to go into trance. Just kind of like with the breath work. Once you got into it and were doing it more, it was more comfortable and you could flow with it better. Same with a hypnotic trance. And so I've got the one client I worked with for 2 years. I don't even have to say anything. She can come in and sit down in my chair, and she's gone, instantly flush. I can watch her neck flush. And I was like, yeah, so we can get right to work. We don't have to go through the induction process with her.
So there's no magic words. There's no snap my fingers and you'll be awake or not awake. Or
No.
Oh, okay. Man.
And a lot of it is just communication skills.
Yeah.
Is what it is. It's like I tell my clients that we're learning how to recommunicate with our brain so that it understands better what we want to happen. I tell my clients all the time, you learn to start using positive suggestions rather than negative suggestions.
Right.
Like with my stop smoking clients, they come in and it's like, I don't want to smoke. I want to quit smoking. And I'm like, we've got to stop that. So it's now I'm a non-smoker. I'm smoke-free. I'm making better choices for me and my family and those that I love because our brains can't process a negative command. If I say, don't think of a blue elephant, the first thing you have to do is think of one. Either a word, a picture, some kind of image concept of a blue elephant before you can delete it from your brain.
So you just don't cross that line at all. You're going straight to the positive as opposed to we have to stop this or this is bad.
Right.
Or however you choose to vilify it or,
It's like when you take the kids out to eat and you say, "Don't spill that drink." What are you doing?
Oh, they're spilling the drink.
You're cleaning the
100%.
table, right?
Yeah.
Or don't run, or don't slam the door.
Right.
So we learn to change it. Be careful with that drink. Speak quietly. Close the door softly, please.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. And because their mind pictures the drink spilling, the door slamming, them yelling.
Right.
And it's the same for adults.
Oh, yeah, we do the same thing. So what happens then when your client is in a trance and you're talking about accessing the unconscious mind? How do you, where's the crossover between the conscious and the unconscious? Because those things would have to overlap at some point, right?
They do, and with what I, do and the training that I've had, we keep the conscious mind confused.
This is
sometimes.
the technique.
One of the techniques.
Okay.
I mean, there's hundreds of techniques out there. One of them is confusion. So I'll use like similar words, like you can present your present conscious with the present moment of this present at this present time kind of thing.
Okay.
And so it just overloads it because our conscious mind can only process about 7 bits of information, plus or minus 2 at any given time.
Right.
The unconscious mind's processing millions of bits per second. It's heart rate, breath, blink.
Yeah.
All of that, blood pressure, is being controlled by the unconscious.
Oh, man. So could you fix somebody's blood pressure with hypnosis?
People have benefited from hypnosis.
Why say fix? Benefit, I guess, is a better word.
And there's different techniques for all of that, depending on what they come to see me for.
Yeah.
There's one technique that I use called mindscaping that I haven't personally done this with someone, but I know a hypnotist that's used it that actually developed the mindscaping technique that I learned from him how to do it. But he's seen people with blood disorders reverse, change, go away from using this technique.
So,
and with allergies, you know, folks with allergies,
that's all
because a
subconscious
lot of allergies it's like our unconscious mind thinks that this little yellow grain of pollen is trying to kill us, and so it goes on full alert. To defend ourselves against that, and that's what creates the allergic reaction.
Okay, so when we say, I said subconscious mind, a second ago at the same time, you were saying unconscious. Are those two things different, subconscious and unconscious?
Not really. I mean, some people use the term differently, but for me, it's interchangeable.
Okay. So, so you're bridging the gap then between the conscious mind and the unconscious mind, and convincing the unconscious mind to do something different?
Giving it better tools and resources.
Okay.
Because what's happened, we were talking earlier about, how used to they would go for the negative and the aversion therapy and that kind of thing. And we've changed that up. What's happened is like was someone come to see me with PTSD, severe trauma and stress from that trauma. Used to, they would try to regress to a cause.
Right.
To the one thing that caused that trauma to happen, you know. But if you think about it, you just use today's Memorial Day when we're recording this. Yeah. So just using that, you see a soldier that comes home from war, 2 soldiers that experienced the same event.
Yeah.
One comes home, severe PTSD. One comes home, fine. Nothing wrong with it.
Yeah.
Okay, so is it that event that caused the PTSD, or is it each one of their individual lives up until that event happened, and how they perceive that event that creates the issues down the road for them? Because there's no one event, with us and the events that we've experienced, losing a child. Mm-hmm. Some people handle that differently than how either you or I have handled that.
Right.
And so it's not that one event that causes the issues, but it's all of life's events.
It's a culmination.
And how we interpret it, perceive it. And so with hypnosis, and the unconscious mind picks up all of these tools, okay? So it uses tools when we experience that traumatic event. Mm-hmm. It's picked up tools that helped us cope with it at that time. Right. And it worked.
Yeah.
And so it's like, hey, this works. This is good. Yeah. This is a good tool.
Yeah.
But 6 years down the road, when something else happens that was not that event, the unconscious mind's like, I've got this tool. I can use it right here.
Yeah.
But that's not the tool that's needed at that time.
Right.
And so my job is to restock the toolbox.
Mm-hmm. So we're trying to use, there's an event that happens, and we feel like that gave us a tool to deal with that event, but we're trying to use that same tool for another event that we felt like caused us trauma also.
Yeah. What is it they say? If all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right?
Yeah. Oh, okay. We're not supposed to pause like this on audio only. Are we? That's what we got left. Okay, cool. So we're right at an hour. Man. So one other question, somebody was like, hey, you need to ask him, is there an example of hypnosis or trance in Scripture?
The word itself is not found as far as in the English translations.
Right. Neither
the Greek,
neither's apocalypse.
Right, or grandfather or Trinity or
right.
So that's what I have a lot of people's like, well, it's not in the Bible, so it can't be good. And I'm like, well, grandfather and Trinity is not in there either. So. But you know, you have the example in the beginning, in Genesis, when God caused a deep sleep to come upon Adam. You have an example of that hypnotic trance concept happening there. Or with Peter, when he's in the trance, and God says, rise, kill, and eat.
Yeah.
You know, and so he's in the trance there. Paul himself experienced a trance when he said, you know, I knew a man that I don't know whether he was alive or dead on the Lord's day. So we have that. We have John and the vision and the revelation. So we have the concept is there throughout the Scripture. The word hypnosis is in the Greek. So when you look up in the Greek, because it means sleep in Greek.
Okay.
So, but now that we understand hypnosis, it's not really a sleep.
Right. Hypnosis is absolutely a Greek word. That's like epignosis or any of those other gnoses that come up in the Greek. Man, you got to come back. We got to do this again sometime.
I enjoyed it.
We're going to have to jump off here because we're just about out of time. But
we can talk about karate and
absolutely.
jiu-jitsu.
I wanted to get to that, but we'll do it again. Let's give us an excuse to bring you back. And I'll have more questions about hypnosis. Maybe we can get Tango to come in and see you, and we'll hypnotize him live on the air. Anyway, thank you so much for coming in. Enjoyed it.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. God bless you guys. We love you. See you next time. Thank you for watching Burnham Podcast. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.